Good evening, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. I think one of the major sticking points that I get curious about, and I think what most photographers struggle with nowadays, is that social media has become quite the forum where you need to share your photography and try to expose yourself, hopefully getting work or being recognized, basically. But social media is quite a strange beast, and many people just try and tackle it randomly without really knowing how it works or what's going on underneath. So with all these complicated algorithms and exposure and how to go about it, it can be quite tough to get the hang of it. And we are lucky enough to have someone with us who knows the ins and outs and can guide us much better into how to tackle social media and actually try and make better use of it to improve our photography. So without further ado, I pass the mic to Edward Degabriele. You're able hands, Edward.
Thank you very much, Charles. So first of all, good evening, everyone. So Charles said, my name is Edward Degabriele. So a bit of an introduction about myself and why I'm the person giving this talk today. So I work full-time in the social media industry. I work at a local company called 3 Hour Malta. We are Malta's largest platform on social media for students and youths. At this point, social media is, like Charles very well said, one of the pillars of what you need to do in order to, first of all, if you're doing this as a business, especially in terms of you're trying to actually make an income, it's one of the pillars of the marketing. Nowadays, you absolutely cannot live without it. And more than that, even if you're a hobbyist, there's a lot to gain from being on social media. I want to start with a bit of a disclaimer. So social media is only social media. What I mean by that is, if you perform well on social media, it means that you're good at social media. Your performance on social media is not, so I'm answering a question. I work at a company called 3 Hour Malta. If your photo performs well or not on social media, it is very rarely an indicator of the quality of the photo. It's an indicator of how good you are at social media. You will see very mediocre work performing exceptionally well, and you'll see fantastic work performing terribly, unfortunately. It is the nature of the space. So I want to make sure that it's very clear that no one allows social media to put them off their work or make them feel like they're not progressing in the space. Further than that, this is a relatively short talk. I've tried to condense the most important points possible here, but social media could be an entire course of its own. But I think here what we'll go over today will give you a really good grounding, and the idea here is what I'm going to be presenting will give you a fundamental understanding of how social media works, and you'll be able to apply that knowledge then in the day-to-day. So very quickly, two terms I'm going to mention relatively often. I'd like to define them now so that no one gets lost. The first one is algorithms. Charles mentioned it already, in fact. So an algorithm is a computer-based system that makes decisions on its own accord, and how it makes that decisions would have been programmed by a human being prior to it working. And social media is full of these algorithms. There's a lot of the decisions being made on how the platform works, and I'll get into this later, are made automatically by pre-programmed software. And it's very important to understand because social media is now full of these algorithms. You'll hear people referring to it as a singular algorithm, but that's incorrect. Algorithms, there are plenty, each platform has its own, some of them work similar to each other, and I'll get into that later. The second term I'm going to mention quite often is engagement. What I say when I say engagement, what I mean is engagement is when people engage with your content. So what does that look like? On Facebook, for example, engagement could be a like, a comment, a share. It could be sending what you've posted as a message to someone else to share it with them in a direct way. That is what we refer to as engagement. And it's different from what we call the third term, impressions or views, which is people see your content. So people can see what you post that is being viewed, then they can engage with your content, which means to actively take an action with your content. Be it, like I said, it could be something small like just leaving a quick like, or leaving a comment, or even sharing it with a friend. And engagement is extremely important, and I'll get into that later. So I'm going to open this by explaining a bit what social media is at its core. So social media, all social media companies, there are plenty of them. You've probably heard of some of them, maybe not all of them. There's Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, LinkedIn is a social media platform. Most people don't realize that. So would WhatsApp be a social media platform technically? But they all work on one fundamental principle. They are all businesses. They are a for-profit structure. And the way they make their profit is not through you, the consumer. So you might have realized, all of you, that you've never paid to use Facebook. You've never paid to use Instagram, for example. That being said, they are making their money, and they're doing that via advertising. So if I want to pay for advertising on social media, I'm paying because they can guarantee that what I pay to be seen will be seen. So therefore, to make their income, they need to make sure that as many people are on their platform as possible and for the longest amount of time possible. That's extremely important to them. If people don't use social media, they can't sell advertising, because when you're selling advertising, you're selling the eyes of people. So they need to make sure the eyes of people are on their platform so that then they can sell that viewership to paying clients. And that is how their business model works, all of them. That does not change. All platforms are the same. There are minor variations, of course. For example, LinkedIn, take an example, does have an option for consumers to pay. So for example, you can pay for LinkedIn Premium, but it's quite rare. And the two, I would say, 2-3 giants at the moment are Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. None of them have this option, and their business model is entirely advertising based. Why is this important, you may be asking me? So now I go back to the algorithms I spoke about earlier. The way these algorithms work is that they are purposely always analyzing what you're doing on social media. Let me take myself as an example. If the algorithm sees, okay, I show a lot of engagement with photography-based content that revolves around photography. I do not engage with content about clothing, for example. The algorithm will then take that information and show me more of what I want to see. So if it knows I like photography content, it will show me more photography content. You guys might have probably seen this without and maybe not realized, but the reason you get sucked into social media as a consumer of it is because it's constantly showing things that you want to see. Now, the only way it is slightly flawed here is that it cannot tell what you engage with positively or negatively. So for example, if I leave an angry comment somewhere because something I see I hated it, then to the algorithm, I've engaged with that content and I like it. That is the only way that it gets it wrong, quite frankly. In fact, some of you may have noticed that on certain platforms such as Facebook, there's an option to say that you did not like seeing something. So there you're actually telling the algorithm, not only am I not going to engage with it, I am teaching you, the algorithm, don't show me more of this. Now, why is this important to us? You need to use the algorithm to your advantage. You scratch its back and it will scratch yours. So what you want is you want to push for people to see your content and engage with your content, because that will tell the algorithm, people like what you're posting, show it to more people. And this is actually how the platforms tend to work. When you initially post something, it is not shown to everyone in your audience, it is shown to a select few. The algorithm will gauge their reaction to it. Did they engage? Did they stop to look at it for a long period of time? Did they leave a comment? Did they share it with a friend? And if that's the case, then say, okay, this was a preferred piece of content. I'm going to show it to more people. And that is how you grow on social media at a fundamental level. And we'll get into the tangibles of that soon. So first of all, is everyone still with me? Does anyone like to ask any questions? I'm going to open the chat box quickly. Or if you'd like to unmute yourselves and ask a question, please go ahead. Just going to wait a bit. Okay, I'm going to assume that everyone's on board so far. So that is how algorithms work. Everything you post is being shown to what I would call a test audience. And if it performs well with the test audience, then it shows it to the audience en masse. So then, alternatively, if the test audience does not react well, if they choose to either just keep scrolling and ignore it, or they choose to, the worst thing they can do, press that button that says, please don't show me more of this, then you'll never even make it past the test audience, and your content, what you're posting, will perform badly. That is the core of how social media works. All of them work the same. I could go into the specifics of each one, but would be here for days otherwise. So that leads me to the next question I want to pose, which is, what is success on social media? Because you've heard people who are big on social media, but what does that actually mean? And the question is, it depends on what you want to do with it. So for example, if you want to increase sales in your photography business, then success in social media is not a large amount of people seeing it. It's the people who are your potential clients seeing your content. You want to put it in front of the right eyes, so to speak. If your goal on social media is to grow your personal brand, become somewhat of a celebrity, or the term I personally don't like to use, but it exists, influencer, then you want it in front of as many eyes as possible. So the first step to being successful on social media is identifying what success on social media means to you. If you're a hobbyist photographer and you're looking for feedback, then you just want it to be seen by the people whose feedback you value. If you want to build a business, you want it to be seen by your potential clients. If you want to build brand in general, you want to be as many people as possible. This is the first step to any social media journey. Like Charles said, everyone tries the social media, but usually it's a case of running blind, which is not a very productive exercise. The first step, like in most things, not just social media, is to identify what your goals are. So let me give a more tangible example along the photography business side of things. If you're a wedding photographer, you just want to make sure that your photography is shown to newly engaged couples, for example. If you specialize in commercial photography for businesses, you want business owners, marketing managers, marketing executives to see your content. If again, you're a hobbyist and you're just posting it for the fun of it, then that's the easiest way, because your goal is simply to post and put your work out there and just see where that goes. Maybe some people will give you feedback. For example, the MIPP wall, the Facebook group we have of the Malta Institute of Professional Photographers. That's a great place to get feedback. So you don't really care about it being seen by as many people as possible. A lot of times we fall into the trap, in fact, that when we're looking for feedback, we want as many people to see it as possible. And we're getting feedback from people who maybe their feedback is not something we should value. Not because some people's opinions are less than others, but at the end of the day, if you want to improve your photography, you need people who are good at it to give you feedback. So it's very, very, very important that you understand and you identify first, you have a bit of a self-discovery exercise on what you want to do with social media. It's a bit hard to gauge through Skype, unfortunately, what if you have any questions, but I have the chat here, so please, any questions you have, just write them there, and as soon as I notice, I'll jump in and answer. Nothing so far, I believe. Great. Okay. So, someone unmuted their mic, I'm not sure. No? Okay. So, for your own photography, like I said, if it's just for you, you can be much more free with social media. Because at the end of the day, you're just trying to put your work out there. And there's not many steps you have to take. In that case, I actually recommend don't stress and waste too much time on it. Because a lot of times what we end up with is we get caught in the social media game. We try to get better at social media. And that takes time instead from actually bettering our photography. And we need to remember that social media is just a means to an end, nothing more. If we want to get better at photography, we have to remember to put our time into photography first and foremost. It's something I've seen happens very often. We get caught in the trap of, I want to get more likes on social media. And instead, because we focus on that, we don't focus on the photography itself, which is an awful shame. So I want to get into now a bit more of the technical side of social media. I'm going to start with what I call a tough pill to swallow, but it is the truth. It's been proven and it's been stated by senior management of social media platforms multiple times. They don't like photography anymore. Because obviously, like I said, their goal is to get more people on their platforms for longer. And they found that video-based content does a much better job of that than static content. So photos would unfortunately fall under that category. But there are still ways we can work around that. And the first I'm going to talk about is format. So the vast majority of people view social media on their phone. And the biggest difference that makes is that they are viewing it on a vertical medium. No one views social media like this, I can assure you. Everyone views it in this orientation. And what that means is that unfortunately, the platforms do not favor photos posted in landscape orientation, because for obvious reasons, a landscape photo takes up much less of the screen than a vertical photo would, since a vertical photo would occupy the screen on a larger scale and for a longer period of time, because when you're scrolling through, a landscape photo will just blur past, whereas as it's scrolling through, a vertical photo would occupy the full length of the screen or close to, which would mean you're more likely to grab someone's attention. Now, that being said, how vertical can you go becomes the question. So now, unfortunately, this is where it becomes a bit, every platform has its own thing, but the standard across multiple platforms is that 4:5 vertical, so sort of the ratio would be 4 on the short side, 5 on the long side, is the most ideal format to post in. Now, obviously, some of you are probably thinking to yourselves, but that's, well, first of all, it's a slightly non-traditional format. And two, it limits you greatly. Especially, for example, if you're a landscape photographer, 4:5 vertical becomes a bit difficult. And the truth is that there's not really a way around that. And the way around it for us is you don't post all the work you want to post. You either shoot for what I call shoot for social, which is you take certain photos when you're out shooting in vertical with the idea that, okay, this one then is for social media. Or alternatively, you crop in. And obviously, though, cropping a landscape photo into 4:5 vertical, if you framed it really carefully for a normal landscape shot, the chances of finding a good crop in 4:5 vertical is extremely difficult. So I recommend what I call shoot for social. And I'll get into that again later because it's useful in another area as well. So that's about format. Now there are formats, for example, I don't know if any of you use Instagram, there's stories. I believe even Facebook has them now. Stories, 16:9 vertical, which is even more of an awkward ratio. It's extremely narrow. But stories are a 24-hour format. Essentially, they're only available for 24 hours, then they disappear. So I wouldn't put too much focus on that. I would use story features. They're labeled very aptly to tell stories. So for example, you're out on a photo shoot, you take the photos, you post one of the photos as a 4:5 vertical, and then you post a few stories, maybe of you speaking to the camera, about explaining how you took that photo, why you took that photo, and you tell a story. That is a good use of social media because you're engaging people. And that leads me, in fact, to my next point, which is context. A photo on its own, we say a photo speaks 1,000 words. Unfortunately, on social media, not exactly. Context is king. So for example, a photo of the rain on its own, no context. Maybe it's a good photo, sure. But a photo of the rain posted on a day where it's particularly bad weather with a caption with it saying today's weather is bothering me. I'm giving an arbitrary example here. That gives context, and even more so, it gives relatability. And that is going to increase engagement. People are more likely to like it because maybe they'll laugh at the pun you put in the caption, or they'll comment, oh my God, I hate this weather. Again, I'm giving very arbitrary examples here, but they're easy to understand. So context is king. And using social media posts within context is extremely beneficial. For example, I think I remember Kevin speaking about the air show. Obviously, most people post photos of the air show right after the air show. But that's not only because it just happened, because that is when it is most contextual. Here's what happened in the last couple of days. Posting a photo of the air show 6 months after the air show has a much lesser impact. Similarly, posting one photo which you feel recap the last year you've had is most contextual. Most contextual, New Year's Eve or New Year's Day. Context is extremely important, and you can use context by timing your photos, captioning them accordingly, and using stuff like stories to give further context to your posts. Again, context is king. Similarly, you want to use your captions to do what we call a call to action. You're calling someone to do something. So what does that actually look like? I'm going to grab the wedding photographer example. A great wedding photo on its own versus a great wedding photo in peak wedding season when people are seeing a lot of photos of their friends at weddings. And in the caption you've written, I'm loving wedding season. Contact now to book your wedding photography package. Context, and you've also spurred them to do something. You have to treat social media like you're spoon feeding. If you don't say it, it doesn't count almost. And this is where I think as photographers we get a bit mixed up, because outside of social media, a lot of these concepts don't apply. But social media, you have to understand that social media and photography are entirely separate things. They're two different industries, they're two different ball games. So you have to understand that what works in traditional photography context does not work on social media. And if you want to succeed on social media, again, success is subjective, it depends on your goals. You have to play the social media game, not necessarily the photography game. And I know this isn't a nice thing. I'm not saying I endorse this or I agree with this. That being said, that's what we're working with here. So the options are either you work around that or you step back. And unfortunately, social media has become so important. I think it's almost impossible to succeed, especially from a business side of things, without it. Now to get a bit more nitty-gritty, I spoke about formats earlier. I'm going to get to the compression algorithm. Okay, so I'm just going to read a comment here aloud that was just passed. I agree with the context, taking the example of the air show. During that week, you will see hundreds of photos of planes to the point that one will just scroll through. It has a negative point as well, I believe. That's very true. And in fact, here, what's important is finding unique context. Copying what everyone else is doing is not going to get you very far. And yes, it's true. For example, I mentioned Kevin's comment. I remember him saying, in fact, that he was quite sick of seeing photos of planes that week. But that, I think, is an example then of how, as photographers, we're not thinking outside of the box enough. You have to find context which you can find uniquely. You need to be a bit creative with social media. Despite all these little tips and tricks, it does require a bit of creativity. For example, a photo of an upset-looking puppy or kitten. I'll get to hashtags a bit later on, so just hold on to that. A photo of an upset animal without context is ridiculous. Post on a Monday mornings and caption it, this is how I feel today. Suddenly it's got context. So being a bit creative with these things goes a very, very long way, Brian. And I totally agree with your point there, that it does have its negative impact. But for example, let me grab the air show again. Posting it 6 months later on its own, out of context. Posting it 6 months later, saying that you've just started or invested in new equipment because you're excited for the next air show, suddenly you've given it context. Context is not only time-based, it could be activity-based. So keep that in mind. So hashtags. I was going to go into compression, but I can tackle this now instead. The role of a lot of things in social media, I have to point this out. A lot of things are not fully public knowledge. It's just a lot of people have done a lot of testing, a lot of experience. There are sometimes, like in many fields, the contradictory schools of thought. And hashtags is one of the most polarizing topics in social media. Before it was less so, but now especially people heavily debate the efficacy of hashtags, whether they actually work or not, or whether they are actually beneficial. So the history of hashtags is this. The original point was, if I take a photo of a plane, I write hashtag plane. And if someone goes and clicks on hashtag plane, they will see every photo ever taken that was marked as hashtag plane. So essentially it was a way of curating a lot of similar photos together and seeing them all as once. Photos, I say photos, in our case it's photos, but any social media content that fell under that hashtag. This as a concept was developed years ago when social media was far smaller than it is now. no one, very few people actually use hashtags as a way of trying to look for particular content anymore. So their efficiency has decreased in that aspect. There are many huge social media based brands that do not use hashtags. Some people say that it helps the algorithm. So for example, if I know that Charles likes architecture and I hashtag architecture, it will say, okay, this is something that Charles would like to see, and it's more likely Charles will see it. But what's happened over time, and this part has been proven, is that now the algorithm doesn't only scan the hashtags, it scans the captions, and there's a debated fact of whether they actually scan the photo and use artificial intelligence to debate what the photo is. This is heavily debated. I've seen people arguing both sides of it, but it's fact that the captions are also scanned. So whether I write hashtag architecture or I just include the word architecture in my caption, the algorithm will pick it up as an architecture-based photo either way. So that's very important to know. I'm seeing someone typing here, so I'm just going to wait for this to come in. In the meantime, guys, just leave your questions in the chat. I have no problem answering them midway. I think it makes it a bit more engaging as well. But to answer your question, are they really beneficial? The answer from my end, and this is again my opinion based on my experience and my own research, questionable at best would be my answer there. Okay, I'll answer this at the end because it's quite a ethical maybe debate. Joseph, if you don't mind. I'm going to move on to compression algorithms because they're very important. Answer this yourselves. How many of you have noticed that a photo you're looking at on your nice editing monitor, you've just exported it, it's great quality, you upload it to Facebook and it looks like trash? It happens to all of us. Unfortunately, since all photos have to be stored on their servers and there's literally millions of pieces of content posted every day, they need to be very efficient with the size of the files. So social media platforms compress your photos, and they do so with no regard whatsoever for the quality. They don't care. As long as it's not absolutely abysmal by the person on the street standard, it's fine. It's fine for social media platforms. Us as photographers, we obviously want our work to be seen in the best quality possible. I mean, we've invested thousands in our equipment. We've invested years in our technique and even in our editing process. So obviously this is quite upsetting. How can you get out of this? So the same way that social media platforms have a compression algorithm, so do the softwares we use to edit. I'm going to speak about Adobe Lightroom because that is my daily sort of bread and butter, but I'm pretty sure any software would have this. You can compress your photo upon export. And what's very good about this is that compression from Lightroom or Capture One or Photoshop, whatever, is far less aggressive and causes a much less substantial negative impact on your photo than the compression algorithms on social media. So what you want to aim to do, essentially, is give your photo to social media compressed already so it doesn't feel it has to compress it further. Now, unfortunately, the way their algorithms work, again, is not publicly known. You'll be deceived by thinking that they have very relatively high size limits for upload. But just because they accept it doesn't mean they won't compress it. So what I go for, I'm just going to say them and I'm going to leave them in the chat very quickly, very quick. The most you want to export as for social media is 1080 pixels short side, especially given the 4:5 ratio I mentioned earlier. So I'm going to just put that in the chat just in case anyone wants to pinch that. This, in my experience, so to give the context, I shoot on a Sony a7 III. The raw file, it's a 24 megapixel full frame sensor, and the raw files are about 50 megabytes. If I export from Lightroom with no compression, it sits roughly in the 10 megabyte range. When I resize the photo to 1080 on the short side in 4x5 vertical, the file size usually then is down from 10 megabytes to just under 1 megabyte. And I found in my experience, and this is relatively agreed upon, there's not much heavy debate about this, that this results in the best quality possible on social media. It's worth noting that in my experience, Facebook is the most aggressive of them all in terms of compression. Instagram is not as bad, but however, all of them tend to do it quite badly. So I would keep that in mind. I've left it in the chat box if anyone wants to pinch it. Please go ahead. There's also a quality slider on Lightroom in the export. Don't touch that. I leave that at 100 and I do the compression via resizing the image. I found the results to be much better that way. To give context, 1080 pixels on the short side, my camera and I think most full frame sensors, I believe, export at 4000 pixels. That would be the original raw file, so to speak, on the short side. So you're downsizing the file quite a bit. And the reason this is not so detrimental is because the screens you're seeing it on are so small that you don't need it. Most of the screens don't have 4000 pixels on them, simple as that. So they're being downsized by the platform anyway. So there's no point letting the platform do it when they're going to destroy the quality of your image. Do it yourself in Lightroom and you'll get much better results. Because we've all been there, we've all uploaded to social media and it looks way worse than what it looked like before. And first of all, it's a bit embarrassing because people, maybe someone doesn't know about the compression algorithms of social media, might say, laluda, a poor quality image. We don't want that to happen, obviously. So that is compression. Yes, so the best thing is to compress in the photo editor. That is correct, yes. You do not want your photo being compressed by social media platforms themselves. You want to compress it yourself. It's worth noting here that sometimes these compression algorithms are very random. They seem to have not much pattern to them. So you can upload using the same exporting settings twice in a row. One time it kicks in and they ruin your photo, one time it doesn't. I'm going to say this about Facebook, even with this compression from Lightroom or your photo editing software. I find that Facebook decreases the quality substantially no matter what you do. And that is one of the disadvantages of Facebook. Okay. I'm going to answer Joseph and Andrew a bit later on. So a quick note on different platforms. Like I said, I can't get into the detail of them because otherwise we'll be here till tomorrow and it's already 7:10 quasi. There are different uses of different platforms. Issa, one thing I am adamant about is don't bite off more than you can chew. Every platform you try to use means more work for you. And at the end of the day, you should be focusing on your photography first and foremost. So that being said, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn. I'm going to grab those four as the main examples. Anyone under the age, this is again debated, but I say under the age of press up 30, Instagram is the place they are primarily at. Facebook is for now a more maturing and an older audience. So if your target audience is the younger demographic, Instagram is the place to be. If your audience is slightly in the older demographic, Facebook is the place to be. What's good is both Facebook and Instagram are owned by the now mother company called Meta. And what that means actually is that from a business perspective, you can manage both of those platforms from the same interface and post the same content to both. That being said, I do not recommend using two platforms and posting the exact same things on both. I do believe that, especially with Instagram and Facebook, there is an overlap of the people on it. And I would recommend if you're only going to do two platforms, those should be the two you're on. TikTok is extremely, extremely young demographic. Very young. I'd say the vast majority of people on TikTok are under the age of 20. They're teens, most of them. That being said, the teens of today are the 20-year-olds of in a few years' time. So this will shift. I mean, a few years ago, Facebook was the place to find all the young people, but audiences shift with time. Yes, compression for Facebook is the same as compression for Instagram. I recommend 4x5 vertical, 10,080 pixels, short side for both. Yes. Again, because they're owned by the same company, they tend to operate, they're the most similar in that sense. TikTok, you can't post photos to. For those of you who have never used TikTok, you can only post video-based content. Even if you can post a video, which is a slideshow of images, but it's video-based content. I don't want to get too much into TikTok because it's quite very substantially different from the others. And I think for the purpose of you guys as photographers, I think unless you're trying to grow a large following fast, I don't think TikTok is the place to be. TikTok is a great, if you want to become a bit of a celebrity, then spend your time on TikTok because it offers the fastest rates of growth. You can go from no one knowing who you are. The compression sizes, Joseph, I mentioned, are listed above. So 10,080 pixels on short side. Lightroom actually has a setting, and this I cannot speak for Lightroom now. Lightroom actually has an export option in terms of it's under the tab resizing in the export dialog, and there's an option you can either set both the length and width, so to speak, the short side and the long side. Or what I like to do is size by short side only, and you punch in 1080, 1080, and it will automatically then do the corresponding amount for the length, which I believe is, off the top of my head, is 1250 on the long side. So that being said, I was explaining different platforms. TikTok TikTok, because it's video based, requires a lot of work, a lot of effort. I don't use TikTok myself, as in I use it for work purposes, obviously, but when it comes to my photography, I don't like to use TikTok much. That being said, Facebook and Instagram, like I was saying, I would not recommend always posting the exact same things. It's, again, this depends on what you want to do. That's why I said all of it always goes back to that first step, identify your goals. So if you are trying to target businesses, the nature of the business will make a difference. If you're targeting very corporate, where the management and the marketing team are going to be a bit older, you should be on Facebook more than Instagram maybe. But the more time passes, more people are on Instagram and shifting to Instagram. Like, to give you context, I am 24 years old, and people I work with who are under the age of 20 sometimes laugh at how much I use Facebook. And I would say I'm 65% on Instagram and 35% on Facebook. So that's the idea of how the shift has been made and it's already happening. But again, I don't want to dive too deep into different platforms because it's a bit of a rabbit hole there. But obviously, I'm available even after the talk. If anyone has any questions or needs any advice, please do contact me. I have no problem with that at all. So we spoke a bit about shooting, about yourselves. Now, when it comes to shooting photography for clients, so one thing I like to do is ask my clients, the first thing I would ask them is, these photos that I'm going to take for you, what are you doing with them? And the reason I ask that is because, especially nowadays when I work with brands, 9 times out of 10, their answer is social media only. No print, maybe web, but very rarely print nowadays. And what does that mean? That means that I have to apply all of the things I've mentioned in terms of the formats, etc., to my client work. So, for example, I shoot very little landscape work, in landscape orientation for clients nowadays, because they tell me I want it for social. I explain to them what I've just explained in this talk, and I end up in my head, my camera is always in vertical orientation, and I'm keeping in mind that I'm going to lose quite a bit from the top and the bottom of the image because of the 4x5 crop. So I actually keep that in mind doing client work. Similarly, when I export client work, I do the export settings I've mentioned, 1080p, short side. I usually provide both, full disclosure. I provide them one file with the full exports, and I provide them one file which is compressed. I just label them for them, full resolution, use this for social media. And usually clients really love that attention to detail. That's something I really recommend you do. Over and above that, not only with brands, with personal class, sort of personal-based photo shoots, like for example a graduation shoot, an engagement shoot, stuff like that. Nowadays, people want to post these photos on social media. Now, when it comes to an occasion, it's more likely that they might want to print and frame. So then I include a mix of both. So in my head, I take the rule of thumb, although this is more of a guide. If I can ideally get every single shot with a framing in vertical and a framing in horizontal, sorry, other way around, vertical, horizontal. So that to me is a staple of what I do with my clients as a photographer, and it's a staple of what I do with my own photography. In fact, if you want to maybe take a look at my Instagram, I've experimented with different formats in the past. So my goal with social media, I'll go into this quickly, is because I work in the field every day, I don't really want to keep working so much on it after the usual full-time hours. And two, I don't, like, photography is not my main source of income, so I don't hyper focus on it. So I use my platform on a very personal basis. But if you have to go see my Instagram, I don't post my photography to Facebook, by the way. I only post it to Instagram. So if anyone would like to go, I'll leave my username in the chat box, and you can check out a bit. I've experimented with different formats in the past. I would recommend it. One quick thing about Instagram versus Facebook, which I don't want to dive into it, but this is, I think, extremely beneficial. Instagram and Facebook both allow you to post, instead of one single photo, a set of photos. The way they differ substantially is that on Instagram, you can choose the sequence they appear in, because you swipe one to the next, and you have full control as the person posting those photos what order they appear in. On Facebook, even if you seem to be able to choose, it randomizes them. That's one of the reasons I don't like Facebook for this. When I post photos in sequence, there's thought to the sequence. Like when, for example, photographers prepare a panel for the institute, there's a thought process to which one comes after the other. Similarly, I do that with my social media posts. Instagram, you choose the sequence. Facebook, you have no control over it. It has been proven that posting sets of photos does increase engagement. Because if you see a photo, great photo, you keep going. But then if there's a sequence, you kind of have to stop and you have to swipe, we say, through it. And fun fact, when I said they track what you're doing in terms of liking, commenting, sharing, they're tracking not only that, they're tracking everything you do. Social media platforms know the amount of time you looked at a post for. Social media platforms know if you looked at it, kept going, looked at it and stopped and waited, or if you looked at it, left and went back to it. Every single micro interaction is tracked and used for the basis of the algorithms I mentioned earlier. So do keep that in mind. If you can keep people even just looking at your photos for longer, that will lead to more people seeing, because the algorithm will think, okay, this was somewhat liked. There's also a big debate about the weighting of each type of interaction. It's relatively, I would say, agreed upon that a like is less valuable than a comment. But then in terms of comment versus share versus sending to someone directly, that's extremely heavily debated, and I personally don't have a particular opinion. But what is agreed on is the like is the cheapest form of this currency. The algorithm, if someone likes a photo, says, they liked it. If they comment, it's way more valuable. The algorithm says, okay, they took the time to actually write a comment. Great. There are even people who debate that what the content of the comment, what's written in the comment, is analyzed. So if it's only an emoji, like for example a heart or a smiley face, that is considered less valuable than a text-based comment. Generic comments like "well done" are, people debate, they're valued less by the algorithm than a lengthy full one sentence, so to speak. So these are all things to keep in mind. Now, I've mentioned about shooting for clients. Compression I've mentioned as well. One thing I want to now dive into slightly, because I didn't mention it last time I gave this presentation, a lot of people asked about it. The watermarks. Now, this is a pet peeve of mine, one of the worst ones. I get it. You don't want to have your work stolen. That is an extremely valid concern, and I do not want to say it's not. But fact is, they make your photo look substantially worse. And if your goal is to try to get people to engage with the photo, you're killing yourself by putting a watermark on it. Simple as that. No one wants to see a watermark. Issa, if you insist because you think your type of photography is prone to being stolen, etc., then at least make it small and put it in the corner. But if you want it to be really engaged with as a piece of content, slapping your watermark across the middle of the photo is shooting yourself in the foot. That is known. It's been studied. It's been seen. There's no debate on this. And if I might weigh in, yes, your photo might get stolen, but it's being stolen in social media quality, which means its use is limited at best. Issa, unfortunately as well, we live in Malta. These things are taken a bit more lightly, unfortunately. However, in my experience, when I've had work stolen off of my social media platform, a simple string of messages to the perpetrator, so to speak, have always solved the issue. Issa, that being said, I understand that in some niches it's more common than others. The only place where I don't hate the watermark, because I get it becomes a problem, and your main source of income is selling the rights to the photo, is the journalism space and the sports industry. So that is the only place where I say, okay, fair enough with a watermark on it. But if you're trying to promote your wedding photography, slapping a watermark across the middle of the photo, you're really, really doing yourself a lot of harm there. Similarly, if it's landscape photography, no one's even going to be able to take it and print it. It's that low quality because it's social media. I say you get away with the compression and the compression from Lightroom because it's on a small screen. If they have to try to take it to make a print out of it, they won't manage. The print will come out terrible. So unless you really, really, really have to do a watermark, just don't. That's my advice. Feel free to say I'm speaking nonsense, but this is something that is now more than ever, I think, very important. And it's also important because nowadays you're facing a lot of competition. We're not the only photographers on social media. There's hundreds of them. Unfortunately, one of the disadvantages of social media is everyone's a photographer now. And what that means is if your content looks uglier than someone else's because you put a watermark on it, people won't engage with your content, the algorithm won't show your work to people, and you won't reach your preset goals, the goals you set in the beginning of social media. That is the plain, simple truth. It's a tough pill to swallow, like many things in social media, and that's basically it on that. Someone asked me, I'm going to address all the questions at the end because I'm just keeping tabs on them. But I believe most of the actual content I wanted to go over is pretty much done here. So I'll get to the questions now. I'm going to scroll to the earliest ones that I skipped over. So context and hashtags that I answered. So Joseph asked, some operators on social media, some doubtful, offer to increase followership by payment. What is your view on this? Don't do it. It's terrible. So what they're doing is they're creating fake accounts with bots, pieces of software, and essentially these things will have thousands of these fake robot accounts, and when you pay for 1,000 followers, it just gets 1,000 of these bots to follow you. What that does, first of all, nowadays the social media platforms are aware of this, and they're constantly scanning for these accounts and constantly deleting them. So you're likely to get scammed up front because you pay for 1,000, and within 2 weeks you'll get 500 instead. And two, you're shooting yourself in the foot because it will use those bot accounts in your test audience I mentioned earlier. And obviously these robot accounts are not going to like, comment, share, and give you feedback. So you're really, really shooting yourself. There's literally no such advantage to paying for followership. It's literally, there's nothing you're going to gain. The only thing you can gain, and I consider this doesn't even count, is that your number of followers that shows to people is bigger. But personally, I think that's absolutely useless. That's my opinion. So that's my answer to that. Are Facebook pages still useful as platforms for photographers to exhibit their work? This is a bit of a contextual question. I'm seeing on my own feed, I'm getting very stuck. Is this for everyone or just for me? So I wanted to ask. Charles, maybe?
It is occasionally getting stuck.
Okay, sorry about that. Truth be told, I set up my camera as my webcam for this. So just to get a bit of better quality, but it has led to a bit of a lag, so sorry about that. So Facebook pages. Facebook pages, the point of a Facebook page in reality is because there's a limit on how many friends you can have on Facebook. And obviously people not want to add acquaintances or people who are potential clients as friends on Facebook. In fact, the limit on Facebook friends is 5,000. So you see a lot of people who use their personal profile on Facebook as their both personal and business and photography rather. And then if they hit 5,000 friends, then they switch to a page. Now, it is debated whether the Facebook as a platform hinders pages in favor of profiles. There is that debate that there's not much evidence to either side of it. So my reasoning is this. You also want to become relatable as a photographer. You need to be a bit personal. What do I mean by that? We're used to being behind the camera, but there is a lot of value from a brand marketing perspective in a bit of content of you yourself as a human being. Because nowadays, when people are looking for a photographer, they don't just want to see that you are capable of creating good images. They want to see that you're friendly, approachable, maybe easy. They want to gauge if you're a person who will be easy to work with. So then the personal profile comes in handy. My recommendation is this. If you're going to use Facebook, use a Facebook page. Because I do believe that there should be a separation between your personal life and your work life. But do include personal tidbits on your Facebook page. Because you want to create your photography brand as this is my photography, it is good photography, and I am also a nice person to work with. And most people nowadays don't feel comfortable hiring something like a photographer if they can't even see what they look like. So people want to see what you look like. They want to see. One thing I've been getting into more, and I got into this through work. They made me do it at work, and is just grabbing my phone and recording videos like this, me speaking to and saying what I'm up to. So it will be something. Literally, I know sometimes it's a bit uncomfortable, but I do genuinely. The first time I did, I wanted to vomit looking at it afterwards, and I got really used to it. It's all a camera, or even if you want to just place the camera down somewhere and speak to the camera, this can be on your phone. The quality of the image really doesn't matter here, and you just simply speak quickly. So I like to do it when I'm out on a shoot with if it's a client that's maybe a bit more renowned, I like to do it. I'll just speak to the camera and say, hi guys, just to let you know, today I'm shooting with this client. Really excited. You're going to see some of the photos soon. So stay tuned. Done. And I post that. And what that also does is it gives, like I said earlier, it gives context. So then when they see that photo later on, this is what we were shooting on Sunday. This is a huge important thing. This is more branding than social media and positioning, but it's a really important tip. So to answer the question in summary, Facebook page, yes. Include personal stuff, also yes, within your Facebook page. Okay, so that was Facebook. Compression we answered. Chris asked, Twitter seems to be growing re-photography. Yes, it is. Any specific advice for Twitter? So I've only recently really started touching a bit within the Twitter space. So internationally, Twitter is a giant. The reason I mentioned it in the beginning when I talked about it is because in the local context, for reasons I'll admit I don't understand, Twitter is quite dead. The Maltese element on Twitter is very subdued compared to Twitter internationally. In the United States, for example, Twitter, I would say, would easily compete with Facebook, probably outdo it almost. So that being said, again, it depends on your goals. If your goal is local audience, don't waste time on Twitter. If you, for any reason, like to grow internationally, for example, maybe you want to be selling your work as art to collectors abroad, then yes, I would focus on Twitter. Twitter, I don't want to give too much advice about, because I'm going to be very honest and transparent, since I don't use it much. I don't use it in my personal, in my photography based, or at work. So it's not one I know much about. But that would be my advice. Only read, even give it attention or give it the thought of and the effort if you're going for an international audience. If the people you need to reach on social media are internationally based. If they're Maltese based, I just wouldn't bother. It's not worth the effort, in my opinion. How important is it to post regularly? Thank you, I missed this earlier. So how many times you post is not that important. How consistently you post is essential. Grab something you're comfortable with and you can reasonably achieve and stick to it. Do not try to commit to posting every day. It's genuinely very difficult. Because if you start to now listen to all the tips I gave you earlier, to have a photo to post, which is contextual, potentially engaging, in the correct format 4x5 vertical, every day, is a genuine nightmare. It's not easy. Maybe you'll do it for a week, maybe 2 weeks, a month, but you need to have constantly churning out material. And if you're not a full-time photographer, that becomes very difficult. Like, I do photography part-time, so I work a full-time 40-hour-a-week job. I do photography outside of those hours. And I don't post daily. I would say, first of all, again, because my goal on social media is I don't really particularly care for my personal photography speaking. I spent months of time not posting anything. Now I got back into it, I'm posting roughly twice a week. But I'm trying to stick now to the twice a week. Which also leads me to say, even though I understand social media extremely well, it's a lot of trial and error. Don't feel too pressured about it, because I used to pressure myself about it. It was honestly extremely stressful. And I made the mistake of getting stressed about posting my photography, and it kind of tainted the experience that I stopped enjoying photography for a short amount of time because of this. So don't overly fuss about that. Times a week or time of day. You mentioned time of day. So people are so active on social media nowadays that time of day has become less relevant. I remember circa 2013, that time, and up till maybe 2016, where that was much, much more impactful. So I used to notice that people are spiking online early evening, and I'd always aim to post at that time. Nowadays, social media, people are on social media so much when they're at work, lunch break and otherwise, before they go to work, when they wake up, before they go to sleep, when they're with family. You see people on social media at family lunches on a Sunday. People are on social media so much that the time of day has become less relevant. That being said, I would split up your day in the sense of, my personal one is 9 a.m. to 10 p.m. kollu l-istess. Outside of those, I avoid, for obvious reasons, that then people start to actually go to sleep, and that's when social media dips. And again, if your audience is international, maybe for some reason you're targeting people in the United States, then maybe think of their time zone instead. But time of day is a lot less relevant than it used to be. Again, this is my opinion, but I think if you think about it, you'll realize that people are on social media all the time, all hours of the day nowadays. Does engagement on other Instagram user content assist with making your contact rank higher? I don't know what it is, because it's labeled as guest. Would you be able to turn on your mic and ask this again? Because I can't quite understand what the question is here.
Hi, Edward. It's Francesco. So basically, does it make a difference if you constantly engage on other photos, for example, like, comment, share? Will it make an effect vis-a-vis your ranking of the content that you will be posting then?
Okay, so that's a very, very, very good question. Well done. Great thought process there. So when I comment on someone's photo, that's more of that is a very beneficial exercise to do. I'll explain something about that later. But more in the sense of, rather than trying to benefit the algorithm, that helps a lot from network building. So if Francesco, if I comment on your photo, someone, and especially if I'm a bit cheeky about it, and I say, great photo, I took something similar. Your network, your audience might see my comment go to check out my work, and I might gain a follower on Instagram, for example, from that. In fact, there is a strategy pioneered by one of the social media gods, Gary Vaynerchuk. I believe he calls it the $1.80 strategy, the $1.80 strategy. And the idea of that is, if you really want to grow extremely fast on social media, especially on Instagram, what you do is you go to or people in your niche. In our case, it's photography. You go on people who have a much bigger following than you do, and you leave your 2 cents, your comment, 90 times a day on 90 pieces of content a day. You just bulk it out in an hour a day, going on 90 pieces of content, and you leave your 2 cents on each one. 90 times, 2 cents each, $1.80. That's where the $1.80 strategy came from. It is proven extremely beneficial. It does genuinely help you grow, especially if the comments you leave are engaging comments. They're comments that might lead people to see your profile. It can be extremely beneficial. From the algorithm side, there probably is an element of that if you're commenting, but more from a user perspective, as you as the end consumer of the content, not as you as the person posting it. So if you comment a lot on landscape photography posts, you're likely to just be seeing more of them yourself as the consumer. It might be beneficial, and at the end of the day, networking is huge on social media. So I do recommend leaving comments, especially in terms of supporting each other. I think as a community, sometimes we don't support each other enough. We always hope that people comment on our stuff, but we're not as willing to comment on other people's. So in terms of just being nice people, I do genuinely recommend it. And yes, it can lead to social media growth via networking more than via algorithm and targeting. I hope that answers your question, Francesco.
Yes, thank you very much.
Cool. So Joseph asks, what are your comments on LinkedIn? So LinkedIn is primarily a business-based platform. So again, back to, sorry to keep repeating this, but I want to really hammer home how important it is. Identify your goals. If you're trying to be a commercial photographer working for companies, then yes, you should be on LinkedIn. At work, I have found people I needed, freelancers, through LinkedIn, because that is the place to be for business to business based transactions. If you are a wedding photographer, I wouldn't really be on LinkedIn. If you're graduations, portraits, I really wouldn't bother. But if you're looking to target companies, and therefore you're aiming to target top-level management, and marketing executives, then yes. And especially you want to be trying to get your foot in the door with marketing agencies there, because essentially you're getting yourself one client, which opens the door to another 10. So LinkedIn, but then in terms of the concepts of LinkedIn, I would stick to the same things. Post to 4x5 vertical, then make the context more business-based. So there you want to be sharing your work for other clients. I worked on this project with client X, for example, and their goal was to show off this particular line of products. This is the work that was done. I would go that route for LinkedIn. You could, if you want to go business to business purely, even on Instagram, you can do that on Instagram as well. And again, for both Instagram and for LinkedIn, still include personal touches. For example, if you're going to do the post I just said, I worked at company X for product line Y, here are the photos. Also, here's one photo of me on the shoot, and maybe we've all been in the situation where you have to take a slightly weird bodily position and posture to get a photo. Share that as a bit of a tidbit. It makes it mean like I got great results and I'm a fun person to work with. So do build the personal side as well, even though LinkedIn is sometimes pigeonholed as business and serious and corporate. Your personal touch should show everywhere. Just be yourself. If, on the other hand, your work ethic is, I am serious, I am corporate, I don't make jokes, I come in, I do the shoot efficiently, and then your selling point that you're extremely quick, efficient, no BS, then show that on LinkedIn and show that on Instagram. But my point is, maybe before I was a bit unclear, when I said be fun, what I meant is be yourself. So if you, yes. Like from my end, I like to have a good time with my clients. I like to get to know them a bit. And I like to, because some people get very stressed when there's a photo shoot, especially if they're not used to it or they're not really well versed in the field. I want to make it sound like and feel to them like, first of all, you can be calm. I've got this. Trust me. If you have any questions, please ask me. If you're doubting anything, please speak to me. I don't bite. That is my personal brand. In fact, the tagline on the tagline I use on my website, which I genuinely believe in, is I start off as your photographer and I end up your long-term colleague.
Yep. Edward, if I can just follow up, Joseph here speaking.
Yes,
so
hi.
the idea, I mean, my thinking behind the LinkedIn question was that if I'm looking to sell my prints, the customer base who have most disposable income will probably be in that segment. I'm not sure how this holds for Instagram and Facebook. You know, I mean, it's one thing trying to grow your brand through Instagram and Facebook. But if I'm there to actually try to sell my prints, my reasoning was, and I don't know whether this is correct, that probably the customer segment with the disposable income to do so would probably be lying within LinkedIn.
Okay, that's a very valid point, and you're on the right track. However, there's one slight mistake there. Yes, the people with the disposable income are on LinkedIn, but the people with disposable income are also on Facebook, and the people with disposable income are on LinkedIn usually for work purposes. They're not really they're going on LinkedIn for their corporate jobs and stuff like that. They're still on Facebook. What you need to do if you're trying to sell prints is find where on Facebook they are.
Yep.
So for example, Facebook groups of people who like to collect prints and purchase prints. You might want to get yourself in some of those. Again, it's not always a numbers game. It's not always about there are as many as possible. It's the right person, finding them. So if you're trying to, thank you very much, Andrew.
Thank you, Edward.
Interesting. Perfect. If you're trying to sell your prints, try find print collectors on Facebook. At the end of the day, most of the time, okay, probably what you're looking for is people who have purchased prints in the past, might post a photo of the print on their wall, for example. You want to be finding these people. And at the end of the day, you don't always have to hit them directly. If I post a photo of a print I've just been commissioned to, and it just come fresh off the printer, and I post a bit of a behind the scenes showing my reaction to it, how happy I am with it, it might be seen by someone who knows someone who's going to want to buy a print.
Okay.
So keep in mind that LinkedIn, especially anyone who's on LinkedIn, let me rephrase it. I don't think there's anyone who is on LinkedIn and not on Facebook, for example, or Instagram. I think anyone is going to be on at least one of those two Facebook, Instagram, and then they're usually LinkedIn is usually an add-on, so to speak. So I would stick to LinkedIn for business-to-business purposes, and when it comes to business-to-consumer, I would still stick to Facebook, but then strategize Facebook accordingly. So, for example, A&A, you're looking for a client who commissions very high-end prints. Like we're talking very large scale, very large price. Detailing using social media would be a good idea. The process of how that happens. Maybe you have a screenshot from a video call with the client when they were detailing what print they're looking for. Maybe you have, again, a photo of it coming fresh out of the printer. Maybe you have a photo of how it was delivered to the client, or a photo of it on the client's wall. Document that. So then if someone with your target customer sees that, they say, this looks like a really interesting process. This person looks very trustworthy. They look like they know what they're doing. And the art is good enough that I think I would drop that money on it. So that's how I would handle LinkedIn.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So that's LinkedIn. Is social media more beneficial to promote your work when compared to your website? Francesco asked this. Very good question, Francesco. So there is it's a business term, the sales funnel. So the sales funnel is essentially the process a potential client goes through from not knowing you exist all the way step by step until the transaction has been made, funds have been taken, payments been made, closed. That's what we call the sales funnel. So social media and Facebook, social media and your website, both can fit into the sales funnel at different points. In my case, and I think this is a general good thing, is that you use social media to cover the first phases of the sales funnel. So you're going from they don't know to exist to they come across you on social media, they get to know about you, a bit more about you via social media, and at some point roundabout there, they go to your website. And there they can get into the nitty-gritty. They can get into, if you post your pricing, If they want to get to know you, have About Me section there. If they want to contact you, they can through there. That being said, nowadays, for photographers especially, there are subsections of photography where a website can be beneficial in the sales funnel. There are some niches where I personally believe there's no advantage to the website, or very little advantage. Usually what I see, if you have to draw a straight line, thank you, Chris, have a good evening. If you have to draw a straight line, the website, for example, let me grab wedding photographers. There, I think the website is essential, because there I think you want to outline what package options you offer, a full portfolio and full resolution. There, I think it should go social media, website, contact, booking, execution. In other industries, I kind of feel like at most it goes social media, website, back to social media to contact you through there, because it's probably easier than a contact form on a website, and execution. So the website's more of a quick detour, so to speak, but then you go back to social media. So do really do a bit of critical thinking yourself about, in your situation, whether the website offers any value that you cannot get through social media. For example, when I do event photography, if I say event, I mean nightlife. That's one thing I do quite often. Well, pre-COVID, I used to do quite often. There, I found that my website played little to no role in the sales process. I found that my clients usually found out about me through other work I've done through my other clients. They'll usually see, okay, I saw the work you did for client X. I really liked it. Can you work for me? And they've never touched the website. So my answer to the question about the website is take it on a case-by-case basis, depending on your niche. Wedding photographers, for example, yes. Headshots, portraits, I would say probably maybe would be that, because you can post that work on social media and have the same effect. But again, then you want to detail your packages, you might want to do that on a website, although you could do it on social media as well. Where the website is interesting, worth noting, is it does play a role more in the sales funnel in brand perception. If I go to hire someone and they don't have a website, in my head, they're less professional. So the content of the website becomes almost secondary. It's more, do they have a website? Ah, cool. Is it nice? Yes, that's all I need to know. It means these people know what they're doing. A lot of the times, the website has just become that. It's become a verification tool of professionalism. So I would keep a website, but promote yourself, do the most of that always on social media, in my opinion. Okay. I think I've managed to get through all the questions. That was quite a lot, but I'm genuinely extremely happy that so many of you chose to ask questions. Please go ahead. If there's nothing else, Charles, I think we can wrap up. What do you think?